In this video, let me talk about what we're now going to do with these kind of sad, poor looking screenshots. Just to make this clear again, our target is not to spend a lot of time to do elevation or perspective renderings like this. Now, in my opinion piece, I talked about that it's cool to be able to do this stuff, and it's actually really enjoyable to do when you have the time. But do we have the time? Is this also the most effective use of our time and to communicate something? Honestly, 3D rendering is just 10 times better, more productive. Period. Is just it. It hurts to say that, but like portrait painting got replaced by photography, hand rendering got replaced by digital 3D rendering because it still takes skill to do this good in a software. So, but why do we sketch? Why do we do illustrations? It's simply a means to very quickly show something, to make something look more interesting than a boring AutoCAD drawing. So, the illustrations are not really important in terms of look. They're really important in terms of the information we put into it, what we illustrate, what we communicate, how we can show somebody what we thought, explored, etc. So a lot of the stuff what I'm going to show is either related to what we put into layers or the overall style. So for example, now I use a bubble diagram. This one here is cleanly drawn with circles, fill colors. Now we can do this with a marker, pencil, or the fill tool on a layer with text and colors. And this bubble diagram is kind of like put into an architectural space already, so it has a little bit of a spatial relationship, which makes it quite easy also to follow and understand. But this is pretty much just programming. Here, for example, is another screenshot of an isometric model. And you see how everything is gray in terms of the architecture, and then everything else is via color. There are also walk paths, etc. all there. And then in comparison, this is actually very informative. Now, because of the color contrast, everything gray and some signal colors, and the legend to the right, we really guide somebody's attention to these images and the functions and the design or topic I try to discuss or the person tries to discuss in these images. Now we want to also touch up the screenshots because this looks actually not too bad. No, this looks let's not talk about it. And the reason why I picked this, while it is actually an AutoCAD like drawing, as you can see, there's a lot of stuff around it. The ground, some like a tree in the back, things which are inside. I can even see through the windows. It's a cut section. I can see some materials, joist, foundation, etc. Very informative. There's a lot of information I can show. Now, this was in 2D, but we also can show, for example, something in 3D. While we are hand sketching, maybe it's a little bit more complicated, but then again, we could 3D model something very basically, make a screenshot and sketch over. I put this image in simply so you can see how just with a tack of color, this looks already much, much nicer than this. So a construction detail you're going to do can be part of the house, but can also be a piece of furniture maybe you designed, or the wall system, whatever you wanna pick on. This is basically really I leave up to you. Particularly for the architecture, skylights, doors, etc. The Ching book is going to be your best friend now because there you find all the information in it. Everybody does a recessed lighting plan or so. This is good. For this project, I'm not going to make you do one. But what I would like you to think about is maybe how can we visualize lights? And these are actually some quite interesting ways to do this. You see they made cones. Now how do we do the cone? There's actually, is it a light here, or where did I? Oh, maybe this was in a different image. Um, they showed the light too, but instead of being soft, it was just basically like a triangular shape. This can be done with the airbrush or however we want to stylize this. But you can see that actually it's quite interesting. This mix of the pure AutoCAD drawing or the CAD drawing, and then some fill, and then the lights on it. It's nice to look at, and I can understand what's going on here. Because this is part of, or because it is an exhibit space, studio space, etc., there are a lot of objects, furniture solutions, etc., 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 we will include. So on this page, now we want to include this somewhere, and I put this image into the selection because it's actually quite nice how, for example, here we have a mix of technical drawing, a little bit of color material rendering. Again, not too much, just to help us understand. Details are left out. For example, here, this whole area is empty. And then surrounding, we have product photos that show basically what is what is where. Even it's actually color matched. So it's actually quite good. It's a little bit static with these very strong lines. It feels a little bit brutish. We can do this better, but I put this in just as an idea. So when we have our plan view, so how do we put stuff onto it? Now, again, what I want to prevent you guys is trying to use a marker rendering technique that simply looks outdated, or it's also very labor intensive. You need to have the skill. Maybe you don't have the skill yet, which is fine. But sketching is, again, is a communication tool. We're not making paintings for a museum. We're making illustrations. And there are techniques to get to there quicker. For example, put some photos in. And there will be a lecture about how we bring photos into concepts too, etc. For example, this is actually an okay presentation board. No, you're not going to do something like this, but I just wanted to bring this up because this is all about storytelling. Left side, a lot of text, read about, plan view, some interior views. On the right side, form development. Now, how did I got to there? And then some details. You see how informative this is. This is really, in this case here, how the architecture works, because this is what we're going to design is a reuse or adaptive reuse gallery exhibit, yada, yada, yada. This is not about like a residential colors, materials, and feel good situation. We want to really stress functionality, navigation of the space. So images like this, for example, can be quite good. Or programming. How do we communicate this? So keep in mind that when we send this out to somebody via email, does the person understand what's going on? So just some nice renderings we can't give the person. The person might not actually understand what our design is. I have this board here put in, and I called it board nope because this is, in my opinion, a really lame piece. Compositionally, it's very boring. There's the center and then circular around all the stuff. Yes, it works. Yada yada yada, but it feels like somebody in 10th grade can do this. There's no artistic skill, and then even here, the um, architectural symbols for everything, that looks so bland and lame. It is just really not inspiring. So we talked a little bit about context, programming, bubble diagram, drafting, cut sections, construction drawings, lighting study, materials, composition. How do we draw all this stuff? So I have here a few examples just to ease your mind a little bit. Take a look at the lines. Now they're so-called typical architect shaky way to match caffeine line drawing. But I think we can all agree that all this together, while shaky, is informative. And that is the key. It does not have to wow us. It has to inform us. This is pretty good. Even while it's kind of loosey. But it's still loosey yet clean because all horizontal and vertical lines, they are vertical and horizontal. When we are sketching by hand our architectural details, not only the architecture but also the furniture, etc., that goes in. I mean, take a look at something like this. This is the complete opposite. Another one. This is kind of very dense, but I just wanted to show you here too how interesting something can look. Now, this is nice and clean, but this can pep this up a little bit more. We can also throw in here and there a little bit of marker or color, particularly here. This image in the center is quite nice because you see only selected elements have marker, the rest is colored out. How are human figures drawn? How do we sketch them in? More abstract, more realistic? I mean, this is something for you also to play with. The lower image is also quite interesting, and then take a look at this vector version on the right side with the shadow study. Now you see the color scheme is quite nice. Also here elements are missing. Again, just we don't have to colorize everything. One more time. Super good, very labor intensive. But I get the same information out of a sketch that looks like this. Yeah, this looks very different than this. But when it comes to communicating what we do, this is totally sufficient. What's really nice in the sketch is the use of color. So basically just fill colors, lines, some dots to simulate materials, errors, text, so annotations explaining what's going on there. This is actually more a perspective look. That doesn't mean you have to do a perspective look. I just wanted to give you an illustration style example here. And this is maybe something I would shoot for. Not necessarily this because this is quite messy. This is too caffeine shaky, but this is actually pretty cool. This is also only a suggestion. If you want to experiment and play, look up your own references, please feel free, do it. Let's take a look at how much do we have to fill and render now, because I was talking about this image here. This is pretty nice looking actually, but that definitely took the person more than 5 minutes to do. It's also very full, maybe borderline cartoonish. This here is actually quite nice and charming. Pretty much just black and white ink and then some color thrown in. Careful with the colors because something like this red or green pops a lot. So maybe some marker strokes would have been better. Again, look at this, dots, 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 some basic hatching or for stones, annotations. So this is quite similar to kind of like this, no? Also here, well, again, this is a perspective. The reason why I put this image in is simply to show you an example of what to colorize and what to leave out. Your mind puts in a lot on its own, and by leaving stuff out, we also draw attention to something. This is quite nice because actually the figures are not really that good, but what I what is nice here is this use of the backdrop. That's the reason why I put this in. Everything is very vectorized, and then the wall is actually a texture. So again, just we can in concepts also Google a surface, brick something, and then just bring it in, stretch it over, or so in a view. And again, I will show you how to do this in a video. This is more advanced, but I thought still to show you this for those who would like to try this out. Now, this is more a mood explorative piece, but it is kind of cool actually. The mix of really dirty, quickie drawings here, some marker pen, Photoshop, and collages. These things can look really, really nice. Now that you have to do something like this, but I picked this because it is so fragmented. It is not perfectly color by number. Every area is spotless, filled with color. Now that's actually what makes this thing look good, or also look. That's a nice afternoon cartoon exercise. And here with images, now we can also do something like this when we key out objects. Yeah, I will make you a video for how to do this too. Now, if you want to put objects in, for example, here the elevation view or so. Now we can have photos of the stuff here, but why not actually do this? If I'm really quite honest, that looks more interesting than maybe just photos and then doing a kind of childish hand marker rendering when the arcs are not even the same. So, however, the downside of this process is you need to find photos of the object you want to use from a particular perspective. Otherwise, you can't really do this now. So that's the downside of this. I'm going to quickly come to an end of what I wanted to talk about. The reason why I put this one in is just to also show you what we can do in terms of space material collage by going away from something like this and show it more like this. And we can all agree there are issues here, and then we can see the perspective is off. But this looks 10 times more interesting and inviting than this, if I'm honest, this scrapbooking exercise. Okay, very good. So I hope this gave you a little bit of an understanding, the type of content I would like to have, the way how we will compose pieces together and present, maybe some of the illustration techniques or styles. And again, we don't have to do these type of renderings. I never say no if somebody wants to do this, but our goal is here. Take these poor little ones and turn those into very informative architecture, interior illustrations. And that's it.